catalyst leaders can be incredibly powerful and incredibly impactful in the right situation, but in other places can flounder or can be wasted or can be destructive. And so it's really about fit.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering catalysts to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations.
And today I am super excited to get time with Cynthia Hansen. I've already told her we need to hang out over wine because I just want to talk with her for hours, but welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Cynthia focuses on driving and scaling social impact across business, civil society, and public-private partnerships. She joined the Adecco Group in 2017 to establish the company's first global foundation, the Innovation Foundation, operating as a social innovation lab. Her areas of expertise include strategy, change management, and partnerships. Previously, and her career is fantastic, you need to go look up the whole thing online, but she held senior roles at the World Economic Forum, Action Planning, World Affairs Council of Washington, and the Amnesty Institute. She served on corporate and nonprofit boards and advises startups. She was also a Global Leadership Fellow for the World Economic Forum. All right, so that's the part that we can look at, but I would love to hear through your lens about your catalytic journey, maybe sharing a few career highlights that help us see your catalytic nature.
Thank you so much. So it's really been a non-linear journey. And this is what I often tell people, when I'm doing career coaching or advising, is that, it's actually the non-linear nature of that makes it really interesting. And what I've liked to do is to look back and figure out what the red thread is. So I had started out in international education. I then went into high-level professional exchange, but the link there was that idea of citizen diplomacy. And then I went from there into looking more broadly at civil society. And this was actually through my graduate work and looking at what are the common things across nonprofit organizations, and then what do they have in common with for-profit organizations, and then how do you actually harness all of that goodness and all of those assets to look at what sits at the nexus of government, business, civil society, academia. And then that was really what led me to the World Economic Forum, which was a gigantic leap because it was the first time that really all those strands were coming together. And I think that was one of those truly catalytic moments for me in my career and just in my learning and development as well.
When people saw, I totally appreciate it. It's funny because when you look at LinkedIn, with a high level of fidelity, you can often tell if someone is likely a catalyst. I'm wondering what people around you said as you were doing this non-linear thing and how you made the decisions to take that next non-linear step. It's not always easy and can feel risky sometimes.
Absolutely. So actually, one of those really pivotal moments, I think, was when I was at the World Economic Forum. So I joined originally as their civil society expert, and that made sense. That was where I was coming from. I'd come from not only being in the nonprofit sector, but then being in consulting for the nonprofit sector. And then that was this natural segue into the World Economic Forum. And then a couple of years in, I was actually about to go on maternity leave, and then I was approached and asked if I would like to take over a team that was managing the relationships with a slice of the top level partner organizations in financial services. And I thought, oh, I don't know anything about financial services. And then my second gut instinct was, that's the wrong side of the fence. That's not what I do. I'm civil society. I don't do financial services. And so I actually spent some good time talking to mentors and people that I really trusted to say, is this a good thing for me? And what do I bring to the table? And what perspective am I going to bring to these conversations that maybe people hadn't heard before? And so I decided to take the leap and actually move into that new role, actually as I came back from maternity leave, and to then figure out what a civil society person and a management consultant and someone who had done public-private partnership would actually bring to this new role. And actually that was one of the best learning opportunities because it was a chance to see financial services from the inside. It was fairly shortly after the financial crash, when financial services were trying to reinvent themselves to also figure out how they would be good corporate citizens. And so it was really the perfect time to go into that. But that was actually a really scary move. And it was something for which I am utterly and forever thankful to the boss who gave me that opportunity. So that was Piers Cumberledge, who I still say is the best boss I've ever had, because he gave me that opportunity and then gave me the space to just make it mine.
Why do you think he picked you, or how did that happen?
That's a great question. I should ask him that. And I think it was because he saw what I had done in civil society, which was to really come in and, map it out, figure out what was working, what was not working, see how it sat within the ecosystem of the World Economic Forum, and then figure out how it could be different. So when I came to the forum, there was already the narrative of public-private partnership and collaboration. But when you would hear it explained, it was primarily government and business. And so civil society was sort of off to the side. And so my challenge at that point was to insert civil society into that narrative. And then now, when you hear the forum talk about it, it's government, business, civil society, academia, it's much more broad-based. But that narrative changed over, say, the last 15 years. So I think it was looking at the change that I had been able to drive in a short amount of time in that first role in the forum, and then looking at how peers wanted to actually change the structure and the approach to the strategic partnership aspect of what the forum did. So he's looking at and kind of collecting people who would then join his senior team and then help him drive that change.
It sounds like he saw the essence of you as a catalyst, honestly, in terms of your systems thinking and your ability to drive change and connect the dots and all of that. I'm wondering, like, how do you relate to the concept of catalyst, and maybe bringing those two things together? How might you articulate the value of a catalyst leader to organizations or other leaders?
So I was really pleased to read about the catalyst leader and that theory behind it, because it kind of gave a name to things that I've seen and these recurring patterns and the types of people that I've seen. And I think it's really important that people can understand what the role of that catalyst leader is within a bigger ecosystem, and that not everybody needs to be a catalyst leader. You don't want a whole room full of people.
Do not.
I actually early on, I was featured in one of the kind of recruitment videos of the World Economic Forum, and they were asking me about leadership and about fit and all this, and I said, just kind of spur of the moment, not everybody fits here. This isn't for everybody, which I think is really true. That I think that's not specific to the World Economic Forum. I think that's true of any organization. Not everybody fits, and you need to figure out, do you fit? Do you add value? Do you take away value? And if you don't, maybe it's not the right fit. So I think that's one of the other important points about catalyst leaders, is that catalyst leaders can be incredibly powerful and incredibly impactful in the right situation, but in other places can flounder or can be wasted or can be destructive. And so it's really about fit.
So how would you articulate the value of a catalyst leader?
I think the value of a catalyst leader is to be able to really identify the change that needs to be made, have that North Star, set up the guardrails for how you get there, pull other people along, and then give them places and space to play in between. Because if it's a command and control, like, this is my way and you're going to do it and just go and execute, then that's not being a catalyst leader. And that's not, in that case, the most effective kind of leadership. But at the same time, just giving people, free range and say, go out and do something and figure it out, then for most people, that won't be effective either. So I think the catalyst leader is someone who can actually balance a bit of both and also flex depending on who you're trying to mobilize and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I hear a lot of sensing capabilities under that too. I want to go back to, so you're like, look, any organization that has too many catalysts is not a good idea. We totally agree with that. You mentioned that you had mentors earlier on, and I'm wondering how you think about, like, do you think in retrospect, your mentors were largely catalysts? Was it a balance? Maybe what advice would you have for catalysts thinking about who they should get on their personal advisory board?
So I actually was kind of resistant for a long time to having mentors. And then over time, there were just people I really resonated with. And some of them were kind of more formal mentors. Most of them were informal mentors. And I found that what worked well was just to go to different people at different times, depending on what I needed or what I wanted to achieve, rather than to set up a formal mentorship where you have to meet once a month. So I do some of those as a mentor as well, and they can be great. But for me, it didn't work so well in that way. It was more to find people of whom there were certain aspects that I really liked or appreciated. So I had a mentor who was particularly good at political maneuvering and like being very true to to ethics and to the purpose, but actually being able to deftly move through conversations and bring people along. And I've had other mentors who are great at seeing talent and then developing talent. So it all depends on what you're trying to achieve, I think.
Yeah, and I love the invitation there to like be really intentional. Like, what do I need right now? And it may be that some people sort of like roll off your personal advisory board or your mentorship because you're like, this is over here's the thing that I need to focus on and develop right now. Going back to you stepping into that role where it wasn't obvious, the word that came to mind as I was listening to you, it's actually a phrase, is imposter syndrome, because we often as catalysts get invited to do these things that are so what feels like outside of our scope and domain expertise when other people see the value that we might bring. I guess two-part question, does that resonate with you, the imposter syndrome, and how do you navigate around it?
Yeah, I think everybody has a bit of imposter syndrome, but I think there's also, if you've done enough of these things, the kind of trial by fire, you don't have imposter syndrome anymore. You just have the, I'm just going to get in and do it. I think part of it was I grew up doing all kinds of competition as a kid. So I did musical competition, I did sports competition, I did, public performance, I did public speaking, I did all these different things, that were really scary, but you just kind of get over the stage fright and you just do it a lot. And I think that was helpful. And then being thrown into other things like suddenly becoming a backpacking leader for this orientation program for my university, or when I went into management consulting, it's like, you're going to now, create an onboarding program for the global board of this organization, or you're going to lead, this discussion with the chairman and the CEO of that organization whom you've never met before. And just being able to go into any room, any situation, and create the rapport, create the conversation, have done the homework and come in prepared, but not be overly scripted, and basically figure out how to navigate and how to move the conversation or move the experience or the engagement in a way that's going to be useful.
Yeah, and the early experience of what ends up being a growth mindset, like you put a lot of work in, you're not going to be number one every single time. And so building that capacity to handle the failure, I think, early on really helps us as catalysts be like, look, here's the risk, but there's a lot of upside potentially if we try this thing. I'm curious what some of the biggest challenges you've experienced as a Catalyst exec, and maybe how you've overcome them. And we also love to hear stories like if there's a fail that helped you learn, those can be super insightful as well.
Sure. So actually, coming into the job that I have now was another big challenge. So when I was ready to leave the World Economic Forum, I wanted to go into something that I could really build from scratch and kind of experiment with. So when I saw this role advertised with the Adecco Group to set up the Global Foundation from scratch, my first thought was I better test this out and see how much latitude there is to actually build something. So I spoke to some people I knew in the company, went ahead and applied, had that conversation then when I interviewed with the CEO. Is this something where you're looking for an implementer to come in and just do, the pieces that have been given as building blocks, or is there scope to actually do something really unique and really different? And the answer I got was a bit of both. It was, yes, you can have space to play as long as you also take care of these building blocks, at least in the beginning, because that's what you've been brought in to do. And so that was an interesting place to start, because then it was stitch together these building blocks, make them better, professionalize them, all of those good things. And I've got the sandbox over here to play with. And so that was also kind of a first challenge of working in a very big multinational, which I had not done before, figuring out how to navigate that at a very senior level, figuring out how to keep the kind of the daily work, the normal stuff going in a way that was positive and the way that was professionalizing, that was moving things forward, and then also be able to build something on the side. So it was this kind of ultimate ambidexterity exercise that was really, really fun, but it was extremely challenging because they were almost like two different roles and therefore kind of two different skill sets that I needed to be doing at the same time. And what I found worked really well was to really embrace the building blocks, the things that I had inherited that had actually been brought over from the group and into the foundation, not feel limited by those, but actually look at those as basically the seed around which to scaffold all the stuff that I wanted to build. So it was make those excellent and use them to experiment around the sides. Okay, how could you take something that, for example, we inherited the relationship with the Lucerne Festival, which was great, but had been a corporate sponsorship relationship. So now that it was in the foundation, I wanted to take that, build it into something that would be basically a nascent version of the Social Innovation Lab and the Social Innovation Projects. So take that and then figure out how do we scaffold around that. Okay, so you've got musicians, you have the academy, you know, what do musicians have and what do they not have that lets them navigate the world of work? So then we dug into that. We did design thinking workshops. We talked to alumni. We talked to staff and figured out, okay, what can you do that we can't do? And what can we bring to the table that you can't do? So in that case, we ended up building a program that would help musicians understand what they had as musicians that was really innate to them, that would make them really good at being a musician or being a lot of other things in the world. And then we built that out as a program. And then the idea was to potentially hand that over into the Lucerne Festival or find another home for it. So at this point, it likely will end up in a university. But that was basically something that had been a very traditional thing that actually the previous chairman loved. That was kind of his baby. He had actually been a sponsor of the Lucerne Festival for a long, long time. And this was a way to take that, pay tribute to it because it was really good, and then morph it into something else. So I think that was the way I was able to kind of do this dance with not just that, with a bunch of other programs similar to that, take something that was good and then make it even better, but make it different in a way that actually moved me towards setting up the Social Innovation Lab, which is what ultimately became the Innovation Foundation.
So cool. I love that your personal music connection came back full circle there, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm curious though. I mean, you were like, okay, the chairman really loved this and you made it sound really easy, and maybe it was. But what we know is people get attached to the way things are, the status quo, or their pet projects. And as we try and sort of morph it and bring it along to the next iteration, we can encounter resistance. How did you overcome, I mean, especially with someone as senior as the chairman?
So a lot of it was to give comfort that we weren't throwing things out. We were actually looking at what was really good and what could be even better. And so I think that idea of we're not fighting against you, we're not saying that this program is bad, we're saying actually this program has immense potential to be something even better, was how I was able to get the buy-in and then to get the buy-in of the whole board. And then I think what actually was the tipping point was the change of chairman. So we changed chairman in 2020. The new chairman coming in actually also loved the Lucerne Festival, also continued with that, but because he didn't have the legacy of that relationship with the organization, was more flexible about being able to build something else and build something, you know, quite different. And so that actually became the bridge into, okay, if we can do that with the Lucerne Festival, we can do that with a bunch of other things that we have. So we did a similar process with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Then we started building our own projects, and we were able to show, hey, we've done this in a hybrid way, scaffolding around these other programs. Let's try it out purely from scratch. Let's see how that works. And then we were able to kind of wean away from the legacy pieces and then build a whole pipeline of things that we were building purely from scratch, but always with the ability to then go back and kind of pay tribute to all the good things that had come first. And it was that kind of step by step making everybody comfortable, building also the ability to measure the impact at the same time that allowed people the comfort to then step back and say, hey, we'll give you a bit more space.
It's so critical. And I mean, again, myself included, we can get so excited about the forward vision, or like you talked about the sandbox for the place. And it's like remembering the brass tacks of you have to be able to show the impact step by step in order to get the permission, the leeway to help you realize the larger vision. I'm wondering if you have any advice around how to do that, but also just managing your own energy of like, I really want to go do that other thing.
So I think part of it was making sure that I had the right team in place. So actually, when I arrived, I inherited a team of 10, and they were all people who were used to just running those programs, and that was great. So I was able to keep people in place, scaffold around them as well. Then, as we built up those programs and ultimately spun them off, then people had a place to go, and then I could keep moving and like adding new people with new skills as well. So I think what made it really possible and made me patient was the ability to change out the people as we were changing out the ways of working and the day-to-day programs that we were running, and actually move away from programs and into projects. And so we did this kind of little by little between 2017 and 2020. And it was really that change of chairman in 2020 that changed everything. So at that point, we were running about 10 different things, and it had all kind of morphed into, good things, but they were pulling in a lot of different directions. We had a bit of humanitarian, a bit of sport, a bit of youth, a bit of women, music. And so when the new chairman came in, I briefed him in and showed him all the things we were doing and how they fit together and what that red thread was, and said, actually, this is a really good moment to stop, take stock, figure out what we want to do. We could either keep running on essentially these parallel tracks, we could go just back to running the legacy stuff, or we could actually go forward just as the Social Innovation Lab. And so, much to his credit, he said, this is great. We'll do a proper review with the board. And so we did that. And by the end of 2020, the board landed on the decision, which is what I had hoped, which was to actually run as the Social Innovation Lab. So they decided that we would run only as the Social Innovation Lab. So therefore, we would actually offboard all of the legacy pieces and rehouse them in places where they could thrive. At the same time, they agreed that we would change the name and the brand. And at the same time, because in order to suit that new vehicle, then we needed to change the governance and the composition of the board. We needed to also change the operating model and the staff. So basically, all of that change happened in 2021, which was also during COVID. And which was crazy. But at the same time, maybe even slightly easier to do it during COVID because everything was kind of out of kilter during COVID. So that then by the beginning of 2022, we were 100% clean as the Innovation Foundation and on this new model of just the Social Innovation Lab. So it gave us time to like really carefully rehouse things so that they would be successful. Build up the methodology, build up the pipeline of projects, build up the pipeline of partners as well, because we work in partnership at every stage. And that basically gave us the really good footing we needed by the beginning of 2022 to really be operating essentially as a new organization.
It sounds to me, Cynthia, like you have some pretty insane sensing capabilities. You talked earlier about knowing when it's a fit and when it's not a fit, which is super important. And that comes down to sensing. You also have the sensing about where the team is combined and how to get them to come along on the journey. But there's also the sensing of the timing, right? It's like by the time the new chairman came in, you had enough data to present some options, but you were sensitive to maybe there's 3 paths, even though you had your favorite, and just sensing the landscape with the partnerships and places to offboard them. How have you developed your amazing sensing capabilities?
I think some of it is inherited. I think some of it you just kind of have, but I think also I grew up in a family that has, I think, really high emotional intelligence. And so that was kind of part of the nurture part. So actually I'm adopted. So there's also this whole kind of question about nature as well. But I think some of it is innate. I think a lot of it is learned. I think a lot of it is environmental. Um, and I think a lot of it also is working in many different settings. So working in different languages, in different cultures, in different settings, having to adapt quickly and kind of drop into a place and get the lay of the land, figure out how things work, who are the decision makers, what are the relationships with them, and all of that was really at the core of systems thinking as well. So I think that all of those experiences basically lend themselves to creating someone who's super adaptable, but also like really good at sensing, because in order to survive and thrive, you have to be able to sense really, really quickly.
Yeah, and there's such a great invitation there. Like, yes, and before we hit record, we were talking about the nature versus nurture thing. And while there's, people can maybe naturally have a little bit more empathy, there's skills and things that you can do to cultivate it. Like you were saying, like put yourself in culturally diverse things, try different jobs in different roles. Like the more that you have to sense in order to be successful, the more you can develop those sensing muscles, which I think is absolutely critical as we're helping organizations thrive and adapt. Any other final challenges you've had as a Catalyst exec that you want to share?
I think one of the toughest challenges, and we've been talking about this a lot, is with a small light team, you can't take in all the great people that you might like. So trying to figure out how to pick and choose and hedge a bit, like what's the mix that I need? Are there people that I can grow into roles? Are there people who actually may not grow into roles? And that's okay too. How do you set up kind of a revolving door, though that sounds negative, right? But this ability to take people in, kind of train them into our ways of working, and then send them out into the world as their own type of catalyst, as their own type of ambassadors of what we do. And that the fact that you don't stay forever and ever is a good thing. Nobody should stay forever and ever. But to figure out what the culture of that is, so that people feel that it's a positive thing to come in and learn and then go someplace else and, go forward and spread the word, rather than this sense of, I really like it here, I want to stay forever, because you shouldn't. Nobody should stay forever.
So how do you operationalize that commitment to diversity on your team?
So a couple of things. We actually have come up with our own grid of the skills and competencies and also representation that we want. We use the same grid actually for the board and for the staff. So that's kind of just one tool.
Cool.
Because it's more art than science, but it lets you have the conversation. So we're looking for people who have vastly diverse backgrounds. This is not just gender, geography, language. It's where did you come from? Where have you worked? What kind of mindset do you bring? What kind of socioeconomic background do you come from? What shapes your worldview? And so I think this is incredibly important, and that's what true diversity is. So, when you look across my team, yes, we've got lots of diversity in terms of gender, sexual orientation, language groups, things like that, where people are based. But more than that, it's about, where do people come from? So here's a little example. We actually had done an end user video. We've got this great program, that project in Mexico, called Youth at Risk. And so this was actually the first one that was it was done from scratch on our scan, build, scale methodology. So this one is to help young mothers in Mexico see a way into work, and then reflect on the skills and competencies they have from their lived experience, and then be able to move toward employment. So we actually did an end user video. We had a bunch of interviews with these young women, and we looked at the first version of this, and it looked great. It shows the young women, it has them talking, it has all of, this interactive, it's lively, it's buzzy. And we showed this to a couple of my colleagues, and one of them is from Brazil. And the first thing she saw was, with these women, you've got images of their kids. Second, they're wearing a t-shirt that has the name of that program that they're in. Third, you've just said their full names. And she said, basically, that guy who wants to come find that woman and her child has all the information that he needs. And the agency that had created that video hadn't thought about that at all. So we need those checks, we need those balances, we need the ability to challenge each other and say, hey, we shouldn't be doing that, or that's not appropriate, or have you thought about this lens? And so that's why that level of diversity of thought is crucial to my team and what we do.
Such a powerful example because it's not theoretical, right? Like the decisions that we're making in a lot of these contexts can have very real consequences. And I think there's an interesting invitation. You know, I also, my last corporate role, had this big spreadsheet about all of the things that you're talking about. And I think just having artifacts and an intentionality around it is the commitment that we need to make. It doesn't mean that you're always going to check all of the boxes in all of the grids, but that we need to like have it top of mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's tools. It's tools. They're not formulas. They're just right. To spur you to think about these things.
Amazing. All right. As we wrap up, I would love to hear about your favorite catalyst, past or present, who inspires you, and why do they stand out to you?
I was thinking about this. I had the pleasure to meet lots of really, really inspiring people. But I was thinking recently about Shireen Ebadi, because she actually had surfaced in the news recently. So she's quite a famous Nobel Prize winner from Iran, first woman judge in Iran, amazing human rights lawyer. And I had the pleasure long ago when I was at the World Economic Forum to spend a whole day with her, and was just in awe of what she had done. But what really astounded me was how personable she was, how open she was to having a conversation, how she asked me questions about me and my work and my life. She talked about her kids. She talked about her family. She talked about what was hard and what she was proud of. And I just found that combination of being really human and accessible, but incredibly steely and powerful and effective, so inspiring.
Badass. I hadn't heard about her before, but I'm totally going to look her up. Thank you so much for opening my horizon. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. Cynthia, this was amazing. I can't wait to have a wine and talk with you for hours, but thank you for the starting conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
To our listening audience, thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or check out our website at catalystconstellations.com. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, please take 10 seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you have Catalyst in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.